Good day. I'm Daniela Ellerbeck, Legal Advisor to Freedom of Religion South Africa, and joining me for this week's discussion on the hate speech bill is 4SA's Executive Director, Michael Swain. Welcome, Michael.
Oh, thank you, Daniela.
So just give a bit of background on this bill before we dive into the discussion, which is now a wrap-up after the Second House of Parliament closed public comments last week, Thursday, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The bill we're going to be talking about today is the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill, which is quite a mouthful. So commonly, everyone just refers to it as the Hate Speech Bill. Now, as we've said, Parliament's second house, the National Council of Provinces, or NCOP, closed the bill for public submissions or public comments at 1 o'clock on Thursday last week. Now, today we're going to be talking about 4SA's campaign with regards to the bill. And we also want to encourage public that their comments have made a difference and talk about the next steps with the bill. So Michael, perhaps kick us off, seeing as you were very closely involved with this. What was the final number of submissions, so public comments that were made on the bill?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say well done, everyone. What a tremendous showing. You know, we're very happy with this result because after an initial slow response, and we really believe that was because people have already commented in thousands in previous opportunities to comment on this bill. The amount of comments really picked up towards the end, and there was tremendous support. So we ended up on the DRSA platform, which is the one that we recommended most people to go to because it's a direct way and a very quick and simple way to make your submission as an individual or even as an organization. We ended up with just over 48,000 submissions that were made through the DRSA platform. And on the day of the deadline closing itself, we went and collected from the airport, which were delivered to us by different religious organizations, boxes containing at least 12,000 additional submissions. So if you tally those up and then you make the assumption, which is probably a very conservative assumption, that at least another 10,000 submissions were made directly to the NCOP committee by people via email, that means that we ended up this campaign with over 70,000 submissions. So that is a significant number. That's not just raising your voice, that is a shout. And then, of course, I think very importantly, we have to look at the overall participation in this bill from its inception. You know, when it was originally open for comment by the Department of Justice, which I think was way back in 2016 or so, they had over 70,000 submissions then, basically pushing back against this bill. And then before the National Assembly, which was in 2021, over 100,000 submissions were made. So all in all, we have had well over 250,000, that's 250,000 submissions made, almost entirely against this bill and the problems that we have identified in this bill.
And it also points to, the lawmaking process being quite a lengthy one. Yeah, just to recap for viewers and listeners, that is the lawmaking process. It starts off in a department, gets open for public comment, goes to Parliament, which is our lawmaking body as a republic, goes to the first House of Parliament, the National Assembly, gets open for public comment, goes to the second House, the National Council of Provinces, or NCOP, gets open for public comment, and then only does it go to the President to be signed into law. It's important to comment on each stage of the process, or at each stage of the process, rather. And
I think it's important to also say that the assumption is that when you comment on, say, the first opportunity, every one of those comments, according to our law, and the Constitutional Court has been clear on this, needs to be read and taken into account. So the assumption is, of course, that when it moves from one stage to the next on its journey through to becoming law, the comments that were made at each stage have been taken into account. And that's basically why they don't count anymore. But here's the problem, of course. When comments are not properly taken into account, when the views expressed by literally tens of thousands of members of the public are simply not taken into account, they are effectively ignored if you don't make them again. So that was why we were so adamant that we must, at this last stage of commenting, continue to make our voices heard and to raise our voices, because this bill actually got progressively worse as it proceeded through, despite the fact that there was so much opposition to it. As we said, starts off with a 3-year jail sentence, ends up with an 8-year jail sentence. I don't believe anybody asked for that.
Indeed. And I mean, this highlights the fact that the public needs to be active and involved. And thank you so much for doing so in this case. Now, Michael, where are we in the process now? And what are the next steps? So we've said there's this draft bill, or bill gets drafted by a department, and then it gets tabled in Parliament, and Parliament has 2 houses, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and then only does the bill or proposed law go to the president to be assented. With the hate speech bill and the 8-year jail sentence for speech, where are we in the process?
Well, at this point, the 70,000 plus submissions that were made must now be read, and their inputs will be summarized and then discussed by the Select Committee on Security and Justice in the NCOP. And also, in addition, we, 4SA and others, have asked and specifically requested that the committee would grant us the opportunity to appear in person so that we can motivate the primary concerns raised in our submission and our proposed changes to the bill, because the bill in its current form is seriously threatening to all types of expression, but particularly, of course, our concern is religious expression. Now, the NCOP does have the power to make changes, and so we're hopeful that they will indeed do so. And in particular, we're going to be pushing for, as a minimum, for hate to be defined. It's bizarre to the extreme that in the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill, there is actually no definition of hate in the current bill. And also, as we've emphasized, the current religious exemption clause must be amended, because at the moment, effectively, it offers little or no protection at all for bona fide religious expression. So anyway, at that point, of course, and assuming that the NCOP does make the changes, which we hope that they will, those will then be referred back to the National Assembly for further deliberation. And of course, once this has taken place, then the final version of the bill, once approved by the National Assembly, will be sent to the president for his signature. But Daniela, what other steps can be taken? Because we are always fighting these things literally until the end. We've done so before on other bills, which have been going through the process. So tell us, what other steps can or may be taken in this instance, if this bill actually does indeed proceed beyond the NCOP and ends up in front of the president for signature?
So if the NCOP makes recommendations and thinks this bill is a good idea, and the National Assembly then approves it, or if the NCOP decides the bill as is a good idea and it just goes straight to the president and gets signed into law, there is obviously the opportunity for people to challenge the constitutionality of the bill, because our Constitution, which specifically protects freedom of expression, which includes the exchange of information and ideas, says that any law or conduct that's inconsistent with it can be challenged, or any infringement on rights that are entrenched in it, such as the right to freedom of expression, can be challenged. So that allows people to take the law to court to decide whether or not it's constitutional. Also, Section 79(1) of the Constitution, before the president signs the bill into law, gives the president the power to send the bill back to Parliament. So it says, okay, the president has this bill on his table that he now needs to sign into law. It's gone through all the processes from the department and Parliament, but he's reading this and he's going, I am seriously concerned that this law is in conflict with the Constitution. He can send it back to Parliament for reconsideration, so that can happen. And if Parliament then sends it back to him and he looks at what they send back to him and he thinks, no, this thing is still not constitutional and I still have my reservations about making this a law, he can send it to the Constitutional Court to decide whether or not it's constitutional. Now, on top of if it becomes law, civil societies or people being able to take the bill to court to decide whether or not it's constitutional, and apart from the president referring it to the National Assembly before he signs it, or to the Constitutional Court, if the National Assembly says, no, we're still okay with it, and he's still not okay with it. There is, of course, the option that if 1/3 of the National Assembly's members, so if members of Parliament and 1/3 of the members of Parliament in the National Assembly are concerned with the bill, they can apply to the Constitutional Court directly within 30 days if the bill becomes law. So within 30 days of the president signing the bill and it becoming law, they can apply to the Constitutional Court directly to say whether or not this bill or this law, then once it's been signed by the president, is constitutional, which of course is a big shortcut in the process, because if people or civil society had to take the bill to court, we can't go directly to the Concord. We have to start in the High Court, then to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and then only to the Concord. And this obviously takes many years. We've seen that the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Anti-Discrimination Act, commonly known as either the Equality Act or simply as PEPUDA, which has a civil prohibition for hate speech. So a court can say, okay, you need to pay damages or you have to apologize, but it's not a crime the way this bill wants to make speech a crime. So you won't go to jail, you won't get a criminal record. We see that hate speech provision in the Equality Act was enforced for over 20 years before it finally got decided in the Constitutional Court that, hang on, this is an unfair limitation on the right to freedom of expression. Now, obviously, there are a lot of nuances and things like that, but we do have prior videos that we can link people to where we discuss the bill at length, including where it differs from the Constitution and so forth.
I think very importantly, Daniela, one of the challenges that can be made to this particular bill, assuming that it does get signed, is that there has been such significant public participation against it over a consistent period. In other words, every time this bill has come up for public comment, there has been a significant challenge against it. I mean, the amount of challenges against this bill literally puts it in the top 5 of any piece of legislation ever proposed by Parliament since our dawn of democracy. And it gives an indication perhaps of just how serious it is that something which will literally limit our speech, and not just limit it, but criminalize it, is actually literally on the verge of becoming in force and enforceable. So at that point, of course, we're going to be also challenging it on the process. So we're going to be arguing that government simply has not and did not at any stage take into consideration the views of the people. And that is something which they are constitutionally obligated to do. So we're going to be definitely arguing that due process was not followed, never mind the unconstitutionality of the bill as well. But let's just hope we don't get there. Let's hope that the NCOP makes significant changes, that they are approved by the National Assembly, and that the president then does sign them into law, or that the president himself realizes the dangers and the concerns that have been expressed by the people about this bill, and he himself does something about it. So we are hopeful. We remain hopeful. And thank you again, everybody, for the tremendous effort that you made in stepping up and making your voice heard in this particular matter.
People, now that they've sent in their comment, to keep track of the bill as it works its way through the last remaining stages at Parliament and then the President's desk?
Well, the best way, of course, is going to be to follow the 4SA website and our Facebook page. We are going to be tracking this thing every single step of the way. We're going to be making presentations. We're going to be having meetings. We're going to be doing everything that we possibly can to make sure that this bill does not go through in its current form. So yeah, follow 4SA, our YouTube channel as well, for Freedom of Religion South Africa, Freedom of Religion SA, our Facebook page, forsa.org.za, our website. And also, we want to appeal to you as well. Please support and partner financially with 4SA. We can only do what we do. We stand as the watchman in a very real sense, looking out for any threats to religious freedom. And we can only do our job and do the work that we believe we've been given to do if we have that level of support from you. So thank you so much.
Good day. This is Daniela Ellerbeck, the legal advisor to Freedom of Religion South Africa. Remember to like and share this video, and then click on the subscribe button to make sure you never miss our video updates on vital religious freedom issues.